Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are very excited that you are here. My name is Daniel Miller. I am the president of the College of Business Alumni Association. We are co-sponsoring this event with the Launchpad, and we're just really excited to have a great conversation today with some awesome panelists about climbing the corporate ladder. I think it's a great topic that interests a lot of people, both in this room and watching online, so we want to welcome both groups of people. Just a quick, I guess, plug for the Alumni Association. The Alumni Association, if you are an alumni of the University of Toledo, it can provide a lot of great benefits. We not only do events like this, but we raise a lot of scholarships for students. I was actually the recipient of a scholarship as a student, and now I'm the president of this great organization. So it's a good way to help students as well as network with other alumni. We primarily try to engage alumni, both in the Toledo area as well as around the country. And we raise scholarships, and yeah, we're just grateful that you guys are here. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over. If you guys will give us a few minutes, we're gonna get the last mic set up, and then we'll dive into our conversation today. Thank you.
Is there anything else anymore?
There's nothing left for us.
At our age, you got to look for any little thing that's coming up.
Just say your name real quick.
Jason Daniels. Jason Daniels.
I'll turn you up.
Tony Lombardi.
Alexis Smith.
Good sound guy is worth his weight in gold.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy O'Donnell, and I'm a senior lecturer here in the College of Business and Innovation here at the University of Toledo, and it's my pleasure to moderate this panel discussion today on climbing the corporate ladder. We've got a great audience of students, alumni, folks from the corporate world, both here and online, and we also have a fabulous panel of experts here who are going to talk to us about their individual journeys and offer some insights and some advice on how to go up that ladder. I want to introduce our panelists just to get started here. Moving on down the line here, we've got Jason Daniels from Jayramon.
Yes.
I did it.
You did it.
Consulting. Tony Lombardi, CIO of the Andersons, and then also Alexis Smith, Director of Organizational Excellence with Promedica. And to get things started, I think it would be useful for all of us to hear a little bit about what their paths have been. After all, they're here to give us all advice, so let's hear what some of their stories are. Jason, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure.
You had quite a career in the nonprofit sector, and then you kind of coupled the nonprofit sector with some consulting, and now you've transitioned over into totally your own gig.
That's right.
Tell us about your path from nonprofit and going through and now being on the corporate side.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for what you're doing today and moderating, and thank you all for being here. And I have to first say I'm a proud graduate of the University of Toledo. That's the thing that matters most. So, I, born and raised here, and you're right. I actually started working for Owens Corning. I spent a year there in the strategy area, and then after that, I worked for several years at the City of Toledo. I was a secretary. And I tell people all the time that working as a secretary, leveraging those skills were tremendous assets for my executive leadership career. And then I spent 12 years working for United Way, 7 years here and 4 years in the Cleveland area until 2016. And then I've always had the business, my wife and I, we've always had the business, which is focused on basically strategy work. We do a lot of strategy work for organizations and companies. And then we have a leadership development part of our organization as well. And we've been doing that full time now for the last 3 years, even though we've had the business for well over 12 years. And it's just been a good ride, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Very good.
Okay, Amy, thank you very much for moderating today. Thank you also for Daniel and the Alumni Association for putting this on, and I look forward to having a conversation with all of you. So I started my career as a programmer. I was a computer science graduate. Started as a developer, had increasing levels of responsibility. I worked in some different industries. I worked in defense for a while, and I worked in government non-defense as well. I went to a corporate environment after about 17 years delivering technology to the government, and became very ingrained and involved in corporate IT and what corporate IT entails and what you have to deliver as a corporate IT leader, and became a CIO in 2010 with a company in Pennsylvania. 2.5 years ago, I left that position and came over to the Andersons as CIO. And so my background also included a stint in product marketing, and so that was just a blast. It was very different. It was marketing technology products, and so from that perspective, we're still in the ballpark, but really as a marketing person, you're much more customer-focused, and I've found that to be of tremendous value as you work in a corporate environment. The other thing I've done differently was I ran a shared services function for my last company, and that was finance and HR, transactional work, but it was a very different perspective of how a company operates and how a back office operates from just the IT portion. Okay, when I graduated college, it was computer science majors. There's no such thing anymore, I don't think. But everything that I learned as a developer, everything I learned in the technology space, managing projects, understanding customers, and understanding what a corporation has to deliver gets to where the CIO role is today, which today is really much less of a technology position and much more of a business leadership position.
I'm dying to hear this story, but how does someone with 2 degrees in classics end up in HR and talent?
I get that question a lot. So, again, thank you very much for having me, Amy. I am also a proud graduate of the University of Toledo, and my father was a professor here for about 35 or 37 years. So we're a proud Rocket family. I do have a bachelor's and master's degree in classics in Latin and ancient Greek. And so anyone who's been here for a while, I've spent quite a bit of time with Dr. Bell ONeill, who I adore. But at that time, when we really talked, this is funny that this is climbing the corporate ladder, and we talked about how vertical ladders don't necessarily exist anymore, and I may be a perfect example. I left and went to the University of Colorado to pursue my PhD in classics and had every intention of being a professor. And after about 1.5 years, I had decided that perhaps that was not the path that I wanted to follow. And so I was teaching high school Latin and philosophy. And did that for a couple of years, and a mid-sized organization of about 600 or 700 people that did indirect car loans came and recruited me because they wanted to build a corporate university for their organization, and they wanted a teacher to do it. And so I said, sure, why not? I'll try that. And so after about 6 months of doing that, their HR director had left, and they came to me and said, I want to be the of HR. And at that time, I was quite young and obviously quite foolish, but it worked out well. I said, sure, I can do that. And so they gave me all of training and benefits and compensation and pay. And I was there for about 3 years, and then at that time decided, because I am very much a Midwesterner in my heart, that I needed to come back to Ohio. And so as I came back to Ohio, I was an HR director for a small startup company, and then chose to step back at that time to raise my family. But again, when you talk about climbing the corporate ladder or growth and development, I knew I needed to stay in the HR space and keep my skills up to date, or it would be very hard for me to transition back full-time into the organization. And I had the opportunity to join the Andersons in an HR position that allowed me to take a couple days off a week. And so I did that, had the opportunity to do that part-time for a couple of years until I chose to come back full-time, and was truly blessed at the Andersons to be able to do something different and radically different every 3 years or so. So I spent time in their retail division doing hiring and training. I then moved over into their grain commodity business where I did a lot of work with their sales managers around development and leadership development, and also did compliance work for them, which was a change. I then had the opportunity to move to the SAP project and do change management, and then came back into the corporate function to head up their organization development department. In September of 2016, Tony and I passed in the night, perhaps, within days. I left Anderson and had the opportunity to move to Promedica, where I was able to do talent management at a much larger scale, being 17,000 employees. And so I have a great opportunity there to be able to integrate all of their systems and work on change. It's something new every day. And now with our acquisition of HCR Manor Care, again, it's a new challenge every day. So have never really said no to anything. And so that's sort of where you get from Latin to where I am today.
It's a great story.
Something that you said really kind of drives my next question for all of you is that in your first role in HR, when you stepped away from teaching, and then they gave you comp and benefits, and they gave you basically everything that you're not familiar with.
Correct.
So when you get tapped for leadership opportunities, what really prepares you if you don't have the experience?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, well, so I like to start with you can't be lazy. When opportunities come your way, you have to take full advantage of those opportunities. Somewhere along the lines, there's a quote that talks about, you know, you listen, you learn, and then you lead. And I think a lot of people, they get opportunities and they want to just jump right in. And they either want to fake it till they make it, which works sometimes, but it doesn't work often. Or they say, well, you know, I'll pick up a few books or I'll Google how I'm supposed to do this job, and then off they go. Well, most of those people are on the unemployment line after about 3 or 4 months. So I think the real thing you should do is, almost every job that I've been given the opportunity, as many of you, a lot of times people see things in you and they want to provide you opportunities for you to grow. And a part of that growth is creating an action plan for yourself. And I think that action plan is you have to begin to do the research on your own. You have to start talking to mentors, talking to other people who are in the role. I would say of the 4 or 5 roles that I've had, even at the city, but at United Way specifically, moving from a fundraiser to an executive vice president of a company of 140 people with a $40 million philanthropy budget, I was not really prepared, per se, for any of those roles that I had. And some of those roles, I wrote my own job description because I saw a gap. But at the end of the day, I jumped in, I talked to mentors, and you have to be vulnerable in leadership. Vulnerability is important, it's key. And sometimes you feel like if you're going to ask questions of your boss or other people who may not work within the organization, that you're letting them know that you don't know something. Well, that's the whole point, right? And mentors want to provide wisdom, they want to give feedback. But you've got to do the hard work. Each role, each step, each opportunity or promotion, my father says it's one thing to get the job, but you've got to do everything it takes to stay there. And I think that's what most people don't. So you've got to have some grit, and you've got to put in the hard work and the sweat equity to...
From my perspective, when I had a new job where I didn't really understand what...
to manage your career up.
Yeah, those are all great points. That's where I started. So what does this job have to produce? What does this department have to produce? What does a good outcome look like? What does success look like? How do you hit a home run in a particular role? And then I work backwards. And I think very important what you said is seek to understand before you seek to influence. Right. And I think if you go to people and you say, hey, look, I'll help you understand something, they're very open to want to educate you and want to help you with your understanding of the role. And interestingly enough, I just had that conversation yesterday or the day before. There's something about our balance sheet that I don't quite get. So a mental note to me was, look, I need to go to the CFO and say, okay, help me understand this particular aspect of what's going on the balance sheet so I can be better knowledgeable of what's going on in the business.
And I think one other thing that has always been really important to me is that whatever position you're going to take on that's going to be a challenge, you need to find a mentor, whether it's a mentor that will carry you through different positions, and also trust your team. So you are certainly not, whether you're taking over a team or building a team, it is a team. It is not just you. And so you have to trust the knowledge of your team, and then also if you can just really find a strong mentor that you can bounce things off of and that will lift you up and that you can show your fears to in a safe space, it really helps you process your thoughts and, to Tony's point, understand what those outcomes are. It's really critical.
What do you think are some of the experiences that you've had that have allowed you to be prepared to listen, lead, and learn and accept those roles, like prior to entering the corporate space?
Well, I think a lot of them are opportunities in school. I was very active in school. A tendency to, I don't know, my mother might call it bossiness, but if someone else is not making a decision, I'm going to make sure that we're all getting together to make a decision. So there's somewhat of a characteristic of impatience or drive that lends people to that. But then numerous positions that were entry-level positions that were not necessarily in leadership. The mistakes that I've made, and I've made plenty of them in entry-level positions and leadership positions, but being able to take those lumps and really process them and think about how you can do it better the next time.
I don't know that you're ever prepared. Like I always told my kids when they were growing up, and my 3 children are now out of college, married, and have kids. But I always told them through high school and preparation for college, keep your options open. You don't have to decide everything now. You have time to decide. And when it came to my own career, I actually had to live that. I had to keep my options open, and by keeping options open, things are presented to you or become available to you that you might not have expected. And you don't want to cut out whole chunks of opportunity. You want to make those opportunities alive for you, so that when the time comes for someone to ask you, hey, how about running HR? Or how about running shared services? Or how about getting into marketing? You're at least emotionally, mentally prepared that you have to do something different. And so that whole notion strikes up a welling within you. You said it very well. To say, all right, I'm gonna go for this, and I'm gonna learn it, and I'm gonna do everything I can do to make it work.
And I would also say, don't play the teamwork aspect of your work small. Early in my career, I was put, in teams, and I prefer to work by myself. And there were many years where, the project my boss would say, this project would have been better if you would have cooperated more as a team member. And I thought, well, and then one day he said, do you plan to lead an organization or a company? And I said, yes. He says, well, then teamwork is where it's at. So teamwork is not necessarily this fuzzy, people fall off of a 6-foot thing and you have to catch them. Teamwork is really about working together. It is about listening. But in teamwork, you build communication. And anyone in the room who's ever had to work with a team or communicate with them on a project for those outcomes, you have to work with people. I mean, we do this work together. We're working. You might work by yourself. I would say don't play the teamwork thing small. Leverage all of the practices for what it means to be a team player. And if you're going to be a boss, most of the time as a boss, you're being paid to figure out what the problems are and to help your team win, help your team meet the objectives, the overall objectives. And it's your job to remove barriers, to communicate. So the teamwork aspect is something I learned early on. I wish I would have paid more attention earlier. I think it would have helped my career sooner, faster.
To that point, speaking to the students that we have here, current students, what can they be doing now to prepare themselves for leadership roles? Because I think oftentimes when we're in school, we're thinking about that entree into the market, but not necessarily when we're going to accept our first leadership roles. So what can they do now? Is it coursework, or is it that involvement engagement? What?
So I'm a huge volunteer your life away. Fall into volunteering if you're a student, even as an adult. most of the jobs and opportunities that come, they don't always come because you're climbing the ladder and you've built this plan that's going to work. It comes because as a volunteer, I see a photographer who volunteered to do something, and that volunteer's work is good, but I'm also looking at that person's disposition, how they speak to people, how they're communicating to them, what effervescence do they give off. Those are all leadership qualities. And then now, when an opportunity comes, I can either refer that person or I can refer that employee based on the fact that they volunteered for me. So people are talking about you and your leadership and what products you have to offer and how you plan to climb the corporate ladder at work based on your willingness to say I'm in, to say I'm all about helping and assisting. Again, there's that teamwork again, being a part of the team. When people see that, that's how your influence can grow, but you've got to give people the opportunity to see it. So I tell students, volunteer, get in front of as many people who have decision-making authority and it can control budgets as possible, and let them speak well of you so that you can advance. That's a big one.
Yeah, I think working as a team in school is really important. I know when I went to college back 100 years ago, a lot of it was your work. I mean, you had to do your work and you had to get your grades and you had to do your assignments. And there were very few opportunities to work with a group as a team. And you know, at work, you don't get to pick your team necessarily. You're put on a team, and you've got to learn how to interact with people, how to understand what their strengths are, what your strengths are, and how to work together to accomplish an objective. So working as a team, I think, is a big thing. I love the advice volunteering. I think that's just terrific. So I'll leave it at that.
And I would just add, I would give the advice to constantly be learning something and evaluating what transferable skills you're getting from each one of those experiences. I've found especially, I'm living proof that the content that you're studying in your degree is really not going to be that applicable perhaps 5 or 10 years from now. But the skills that you're learning around studying, working in teams, being able to set timelines, executing, influencing, all of those things, that's what people hire leaders to do. So anytime that you have that opportunity that you can reflect on experiences that you've had and what skills you're taking away from that you could transfer into a project lead or a leadership type position, it will benefit you because now you're focused on it and it's not just happening organically or by chance, it's purposeful.
That's right.
That's good.
Boy, that was music to my ears. I think the phrase transferable skills is probably the second most often said phrase that I use in my classroom. Daniel, where are you? Am I right? Absolutely. Let's talk about changes. Changes, say, in the corporate environment in the last 5 to 10 years. What have you seen that's different that might impact an individual's desire or ability to advance?
Technology is the big one. You know, we weren't glued to our phones 5 years ago. We didn't have artificial intelligence becoming pervasive. You know, we didn't have voice recognition in our homes. You know, and so you look at some of what's happening in technology, and that's all brand new in the last 5 years. And that affects not only the outcomes you deliver, but it affects how you interact with each other. You know, so, you know, what tools do you use? How do you leverage those tools? I've worked with teams that are in India, Asia, China, across Europe. And so how do those tools then allow you to interact and collaborate effectively? I think that's something I've seen as the biggest change.
Yeah. I would say coupled with that, for several years, I worked on a digital strategy focused around engagement from a philanthropy perspective because technology has been growing. And what we also found is, especially with the millennials, is millennials help bring others along. So if you want, kind of back to that volunteer piece, but if you have something you want done, you really should tap into the resources of a millennial, because if they like something, they're going to tell 50 of their friends and bring them on to help you. Now, I say that because from the digital strategy perspective, what is interesting with technology is engagement is the other piece that I think is missing. I think we take for granted, especially in our careers, I think we take for granted the aspect of what does it mean to be an engaged citizen or an engaged person at work. I know it's a little bit probably beyond just communication, but engagement is, it's you talking, it's you creating something, and you're sharing it with someone else, and them too. It's engagement. If you're getting married, you're engaged. You're making a promise that I am going to move to the next level. And I think at work, you should really be looking at how do you leverage the technology that you have to further engage both at work with your customers, with constituents, with donors, with friends. Technology really can be and should be our friend, and I don't think we maximize it the way we should. I think we spend a lot of time on social media, and it's busy work, and we think that that's producing something. But again, if you're really trying to make something happen, leveraging technology and using it so that you can stronger engage for your career path or for the people around you, I think can be pretty powerful if you leverage it the right way.
And I think technology has really brought about a huge change in the structure of organizations as far as the jobs that exist today will not be the jobs that will exist, or the leadership positions that will exist 3 years from now. So now you have a whole generation entering the workforce who live in what I like to call a very individualized world. You can set your phones to whatever colors you want and pictures you want. And so they need to have an individualized experience within this standardized world of a corporate environment. And it used to be I'm going to be an analyst 1, analyst 2, analyst 3. But now you have to be able to provide numerous opportunities, and the individual needs to own that. And again, when we talk about transferable skills and developing core skills that will be applicable 5 years from now, even in a position that you don't know what that position will be, but you know where you want to head, if you understand what I mean by that.
Generation is one of the words that I heard a couple of times there. How do generational differences within the workplace either help or hinder operations?
Well, it's interesting. I think they truly can help an organization if there can be mutual respect, where you have the younger generations coming in and their potential and capability around technology, different ways of thinking is huge and can radically change an organization. But what they don't have, and you can't get without years, is experience and wisdom. Wisdom only comes through experience. So now you have people who are on the other end of their career, and they have this immense wisdom around just sort of relationships and influence. And if they can come together, if you can find that sweet spot where they appreciate each other, that's where you're really going to see people flourish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of the workplace as kind of a quilted fabric, if you will, where it's not the thread, it's not the color of the material, it's not how necessarily it's constructed, but that all has to work together toward an end, and all those different pieces are going to have to understand how to interact and work with each other to accomplish that end. So, to me, it's not just about tenure in the workplace. It's about your past experiences, how you approach problem solving. It's a diversity of thought and a diversity of approach, as well as diversity of background and diversity of all kinds of attributes that you bring to the table that then make a quilt that looks beautiful.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Very good. Have any of you ever felt like you had plateaued and you were looking for that next opportunity, or have those opportunities just found you?
Yeah, I don't know what plateau means.
Stuck.
That's almost, I'm being facetious. You make your day. You make your day, you make your outcomes, you make your relationships, and there isn't a time in any given day where I don't have 25 things I could go do. And so it's up to us to pick, from a prioritization perspective, what do you do and what don't you do, and you have to make choices. And so when it gets to the point where those choices aren't exciting, I haven't gotten there yet. So you want to keep yourself in a position where you've got that frame in front of you, or that ramp maybe, I don't know what metaphor to use, in front of you, where you can be excited about doing the next 3 or 5 or 10 things.
I would also say, thinking about the question about Plateau, this is more so a comment based on what you just said. I think a lot of people in the workplace, I think they leave their jobs sometimes too soon, because I think people have the framework, and sometimes that plateau is things are not happening for you in the workplace, or a promotion as fast as you might think it should. And I have this saying that time has a way to keep on blessing you. Sometimes you just need to stay at it. Stay at your framework, stay at your plan, and you need to keep moving forward. And as long as you know that you're doing really good work, especially if your boss in the workplace is saying you're doing really good work, that's not always the opportunity or the time for you to say, now I'm going to leave and go to another job, or I'm going to switch what I'm doing well already and move to the next thing. Sometimes you need to stay at it, because it's the timing of the opportunity. And I just see a lot of people, so for all of the folks who are in school, we live in a society where everything happens so quickly. We want promotions every 6 months. We want like the Instagram life at work, and it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't happen that way. You can't put filters on things. I mean, in leadership and at work, you've got to do the work, you've got to do the practice. But I would say, based on your comment, stay at what you're doing, especially if no one's complaining. Keep doing a good work, because you will get rewarded for your labor, to be honest. But sometimes I think people leave a little bit too soon, and I think they look at that as the plateau, like, okay, well, there's not a lot of action going, so now it's time for me to move on to the next job. I would say stay put, and make sure you're talking to your, getting wisdom and talking to your mentors, but really stretch out your leadership at work, for sure.
Yeah, and I would just say, I really think that if someone feels like they've plateaued, you really have no one to blame but yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are always asking, not necessarily for more, but for different, I have never met someone in a company that didn't have more than enough projects, more than enough initiatives as they move through this quick pace. And organizations start to learn who can take on these challenges and who wants to do these challenges. And they learn that not because they're out there interviewing everybody, it's because those individuals speak up and say, I want this. Give it to me, I want to take a hold of it, I want to do more, I want to grow. So you have to own your own destiny there and really speak up, and people will give you projects to work on.
Right.
I don't care where you work.
8 if anyone's available.
I don't care where you work. There are opportunities abound.
Yeah.
And so find an opportunity or two where you can apply your skill and stretch yourself a bit.
Yeah, and I think the key is apply your skill. Don't sign up for stuff if you're not good at it. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Focus on the things that are your strength. They help you come alive at work, where people are telling you, you do a really good job at this, then do more of that. And sometimes you don't always get paid for it either. Sometimes, again, the pay comes later in the recognition. All of us at the last line of our job descriptions, it said other duties as assigned. Sometimes you don't have to wait for those duties to be assigned. Like you just said, there's tons of opportunities within the workplace. So find something that's within your strength, and then say, you know what, let me go ahead and sign up for it. It's not always about the pay. Sometimes it's just about you being able to exercise the skill so that you can move toward promotion, or just be the chosen person, honestly, in the office that can get the job done. Sometimes that self-recognition is enough.
So if you could just comment on, because I heard hints of this, better to move up or move laterally? Or it depends?
Depends.
Yeah, depends.
Depends. There are plenty of experiences you can get laterally. And so, again, in the notion of keep your options open, if you can move laterally and learn something new, learn a different skill, have different relationships, then by all means, that's an option for you. Moving up, if that's an opportunity in front of you, then and that matches your skills and gives you an opportunity to, establish some new relationships or do something different, by all means do that. But so it depends. You've got to take it case by case.
I think you really need to be very clear on what you want out of your career. And so then you have to look at the opportunities of what's going to help develop that. So if you really want to lead groups of people and you're in a vertical, moving up may not be where you're going to get those skills because you're not ready for that position. But you could move laterally and be leading a smaller group of people, or sometimes even move down to be able to take 2 steps up so that you can manage a project, but something that fits your needs of development so that you're ready when that opportunity comes.
I'm glad you said that. That's really good. You should always play the long game. Right? It's not about today, tomorrow, this month, this year. It's the long game.
I remember a time my boss came to me and said that he had a great opportunity for me. And I was like, oh, great, a promotion, this is wonderful. And I'm having the conversation, and basically he's like, so, this department that you've been running, you're not going to run this department anymore. And I was like, okay, great. And as the conversation went on, it ended up being a pay cut because I was no longer going to be managing teams of people. But what my wife helped me quickly understand is, you said it, it's got to fit your life, right? I was already having headaches. I was tired of hearing about people not being able to make it to work for whatever issues. And I think what my boss knew is sometimes the step back is a promotion. So those 3 years where I was a chief strategy officer, working by myself, working with the CEO, working with the board, aligning the organization to be more productive and make more money, it is that got me the position to then lead 136 people and travel all over the country doing great work. But sometimes we don't always see that. So that was not a demotion. I had to quickly realize this is a move for me that's going to benefit me tremendously. So it's not always about the title. It's not always about the money. And I think we have to step back. Again, I keep going back to the front. Whatever your plan is, sometimes that fits into your plan and it can become very beneficial for you. Very.
Which is actually where I was going with my next question. How does that ascent affect work or life outside of work?
You don't have a life? No. I think, I'll say this. I think the people who are around you and the people who are in your life will make or break your career track, your promotions, period, because those are the people that you see the least at home. So whether that's your family, your kids, you see your coworkers more than you see your spouses or your partners most of the time. And so what I would answer that with is you have to really get good about how you want your home life. What do you want your home life and home experiences to look like for yourself and for your kids and everyone else as a part of the formula for whatever your career growth and trajectory is. You don't make those decisions aside, you make them together. And sometimes your spouse knows when you're going for a promotion or something like that, if that person or your partner, or maybe even a parent, if you're living with them, says, I don't think this is the best for you, you need to listen. Because sometimes you'll take on a little bit more than you can chew, and then everything gets in disarray, right? So I just want to say that I think these two probably have far more experience in terms of the workplace and some examples, but I would say keep that in mind no matter what. As you're moving up the ladder, everything is affected, of course, especially if you have kids. I've got a 7-year-old. I got a promotion when my daughter was 6 months. There's a lot of things that are just thrown up in the air, but you've got to consider all of the things, not just 25 or 30 or 50% of them. So.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I always viewed work as a means, not an end. And while I wanted always to be very successful at work, and I always wanted to be, I felt an obligation as a provider. I felt an obligation as, being a responsible adult. And I always felt an obligation to use, my skills to be the best I can be, and then the opportunities came. But really work, you don't live to work, you work to live. And there's a context there, and there's a priority there that you have to consider as you consider what your career is. My wife and I have a strong faith, and so that's really important to us. I have a wife and children. Now those are, I'm going to be remembered for them a lot more than I'm going to be remembered for whatever SAP project I did.
Right.
And so this is all important, and it's great, and I'm glad we're talking about it, and I want to see everyone here be successful in their careers. But remember, life lives in context, and this isn't the be-all, end-all. So being with your family, supporting your wife, or in my case, my wife, supporting your children, and in my case, grandchildren, that's way more important than what happens to me at work. And if someone walked into my office today and said, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction, okay, fine. And so because the rest of life is more important to me than this. So I like the notion of climbing a career ladder, and I think we ought to be the best we can be at work. We ought to understand what the dynamics of that will continue to be, but there's a context.
And understanding each person's journey is different. Just from the perspective, I've always been a working mother. I have 3 children, and I have always worked. And so there's certain things and certain opportunities that I've had to say no to because that's my priority. My spouse owns a business here in this area, so move to Chicago or New York for a job was not going to be part of my plan. It just never has been. Now, we probably could have talked about that if the opportunity arose, but understanding what your variables are, and my journey is very different than Tony's journey is or Jason's journey is, but you just have to really be true to yourself and to your priorities.
Yep.
I want to put our audience members on notice here that we're getting very close to the time where we're going to open it up for questions, so I'm hopeful that you have some of those developed so we can turn the conversation over to you. But I also want to ask our panelists, aside from what's on your written job description, what other commitments or obligations do you feel you have to your teams?
I'm not even sure what's on my job description.
I was going to say the same thing.
I'm not really sure what's written on there. But again, my number one obligation is to my team and to the development of my team. I rise and fall with my team. They do all the work, right? I'm there to direct the work and to lead them and to provide vision. But if you aren't developing people either to take your place or to leave your team to move up and to grow, then you aren't doing your job as a leader. That really is your number one priority, and the budgeting and the vendor management and everything else is really secondary to that. So I try to invest the majority of my time in team development. And so you can't be sad when someone chooses to leave the organization. You're sad because you don't want them to leave. But if it's for a great opportunity that they wouldn't have been able to have at your organization, then you should be proud that hopefully you as a leader had something to do with developing that.
Okay. Any questions from our audience? Yes.
Did any of you ever have the experience of having to leave a sinking ship for one reason or another, markets drying up, some kind of level loss in the organization something just didn't seem right, and you had to say, I gotta get out of here? Did that ever happen to any of you, or do you know instances from other people like that?
It's not happened to me personally. Trying to think of a situation where I may have been involved. I don't really remember any, oh my gosh, I have to get out of here kinds of situation. Yeah.
I wouldn't say, I probably wouldn't necessarily say it in that way, but sometimes you have to make that decision not because the ship is sinking, but because you will sink on your own ship if you stay there. So government kind of perpetuates itself. So when I worked for the city of Toledo, which was great, it was a wonderful place, but what I knew, based on the career path that I had for myself and the vision that I had for myself, I knew that after 3.5 years in the role that I was in, I've always had incredible bosses. And so at that time, Mayor Finkbeiner and Mayor Jack Ford, wonderful bosses, wonderful immediate bosses. But what I knew is that if I stay in this role for like 3 more months, the trajectory of my career and life, the path of my overall life is going to suffer. And that was because I was at a point of growth professionally where I said, I'm ready to go to the next level. It didn't have anything to do with necessarily the people there. It was like you said, I had to take control. And for about a year, I was just comfortable going to work and doing the job. And then I said, you know what, there's got to be more to life than this right here. And in order for me to stretch myself, because I started feeling too comfortable in my role, I said, I've got to do something different. And then I had to create a different plan, and I created some new pathways, which then led me to the 12-year career that I ended up having, and it was the best decision for myself. So sometimes you do have to say, you know what, I got to get out of here, and then other times you just have to, it's a little different, but you got to, in order for you to really grow and for you to really excel, you've just got to make the leap yourself and change.
That's well said, and I think to answer your question, there are different things that can trigger that. If you're uncomfortable in your current assignment, then maybe that triggers.
Right.
If there are opportunities that you are out there and you can address those opportunities, that's another reason. If you're uncomfortable with the future of the place you're working, then that might be another reason. If you don't fit well with your company's culture, that might be another reason. But there are lots of reasons why you decide I'm going to go do something different, one of which might be the state of the company.
And just my one piece of advice with that is I've told some people, whether it's, I see the writing on the wall or I'm not happy, whatever it might be very clear that you're not running from something and that you are very purposely running to something because you own your own career and you need to make sure that you're going somewhere better than where you're at. There is something to be said about the grass is always greener, right? Everybody can see it differently, but usually if somebody runs from something because they just need to get out of a situation, it usually is not a well-thought plan and it doesn't turn out well. So talented people, you have time. You have time and you can, if you have your skill set together, you can always go and look for what that next step might be.
That's a great point.
Other questions, please?
Thinking about your quote-unquote past mistakes, how did you turn that situation around and use it as a strength later in life as your decision making?
Well, you try not to make the same mistake twice, right? So you better learn from it because luckily, hopefully you work in an environment where mistakes are allowed. I say that some environments and in the pace and the high pressure of industries today, it's really hard to let people fail, but you really need to let them. And I've been blessed to be in environments where I was allowed to fail, but you're really not allowed to fail the same way twice. So being able to step back and also, again, having a mentor, someone that you can talk it through with that can be objective and give you some chances of how are you going to change and do that differently the next time.
Yeah, what will you do differently? What did you learn? If you can answer those two questions well, then that goes a long way.
I would also say this is where those mentors are also important, and the people who have been around you, sometimes maybe they're subordinates or maybe they're your equal, but again, being vulnerable and asking them, and you just have to say, I made a mistake. A lot of times at work, we don't like to say that, maybe the boss tugged us and pulled us to the side, or maybe we got written up for something. But the only way you can learn is you've got to be able to ask the people around you, be comfortable, and find somebody you trust. Not that's going to put it on Twitter, but talk to someone and ask them the question. People will give you feedback if you allow them the opportunity to do it. Most of the time, as professionals and individuals, we don't allow that. We want to hide. And I think, again, stepping forward in leadership, if you want to learn and grow from those mistakes, ask the people who are closest to you. They will tell you the truth.
Very good. Other questions from the audience?
I'll throw out another one. Have any of you had the experience of working near someone who was just too blatantly ambitious and letting everybody know it except the way it is?
Never happens in the workplace.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to you don't pick your team. You know, you have to adapt to people's styles. And even if it's a style you don't particularly appreciate or mesh with, you've got to adapt. And so it's not your responsibility as a coworker. It's your responsibility to be honest with them when you get the opportunity. It may be your responsibility to identify a struggle that you're having as a result of toxic behavior. But you're not going to fix it necessarily. Now you can. I mean, you can be a friend of that person. You can, personally, what's going on in your life, what's happening, what's the nature of the way you're behaving. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable, but you remember you're a peer in that situation.
You can't control the behavior of other people. You can only control your own. But yes, it's very frustrating. You have to trust that others are recognizing what you see. But sometimes that doesn't always happen, right? And that person gets the promotion and you didn't get the promotion, or someone, that's life, right? It's like the group project, right? So there's always somebody that maybe didn't do anything, but you're all getting the same grade. That's life.
So when time is a factor and you get that position where you're the leader of that project and you feel like you're on the clock, what do you do to learn the systems? Because I think when you learn the systems, you can do things pretty quickly. What do you do to learn those systems that help you to be successful in that particular position? Maybe think of when you guys got a new position and the clock was ticking. What were some things you did to acclimate to those new systems and new culture or whatever?
Talked about that a little bit before, just in terms of seeking to understand before you seek to influence. Asking questions, be clear about your objectives. Communicate very regularly with the person you're working for so that you're heading down the right path, if you will. Understanding the skills and capabilities of your team. I think you talked about that before as well. So those are all the things that go through your mind, when you get a new role and you have to fit in somehow. And now you're in a position of responsibility, so it's not just fit in, but to make it all work.
My daughter had the Olympics today, so I got her late. I'm sorry. She's 3. It was awesome.
I think I heard the word adaptability a little bit ago. I would say when you're going into a new environment, culture is important. Know that you have an organizational culture, but you also have a team culture. You have a division culture. And if you get promoted and you're moving into a new area, take the time to learn, ask questions. Sometimes it's as simple as, I remember a lady, everybody I'm sure you have, like if you bring your lunch, if you're not there early enough, all of the lunches end up in the refrigerator and now there's not enough space for you. So there's a culture, right? Get there early, you can get your lunch into the refrigerator. That's simple, but you don't want to upset sometimes the culture when you're coming in new. So your ideas may have to take a back seat. You want to find out what is the culture, how do I acclimate? How can I leverage my leadership and be flexible in the listening so I understand that? So adaptability and culture, and I think, again, we said it before, the other one is spend the necessary time communicating with the people who are on the team or in that maybe new division or new company about how they do things, period. Because that will help you along the way for sure.
I think we had a question over here as well.
You all had
creating those spaces where we can come together more and build from the experiences that we both may bring to the table.
How millennials work with other generations. Okay, gotcha.
Any recommendations would be great.
I think if you're sincere in asking their advice on something and really listening, you'll be amazed how quickly you can build that relationship. You have and this is my observation, you have the generation that is maybe 5 to 10 years from retirement. They have all of this experience to give, all of this wisdom, but the speak is this tech speak. It's all something that they can't necessarily relate to. So if you could even just ask them a question about a situation, how would you have approached this? Then they can talk in their own language about relationships they've built, how they've been able to influence, and that's really where the meat is. Because you don't want them to teach you how to use that software platform because you already know, but you will gain huge from understanding how did they handle a conflict once? How did they, just simple questions like this, how did you move through your career? And 75% of them will be absolutely open to sharing that.
If you come up to me and say, hey, can we have a cup of coffee together so I can ask you a few questions about work? Anyone who would deny that, you wouldn't want to sit with them anyway. So, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to approach people that way and ask them questions. Now, you're going to contribute to that conversation too, which is what I hope you will do. But I would be more than happy to sit with people, and it happens fairly frequently. Hey, can I talk to you about this or that or the other thing? Sure.
I think the other thing too is if you're asking people of their time and opinions, sometimes follow through is important. And so for instance, if you're talking with someone and they say, well, why don't you try this or do that? Or then maybe they give you a book to read. Just circle back and let them know that you did it. They're more willing to then say, let me keep investing in this person because I see that they're following through. One of the issues I have with folks who are a lot of millennials is they just want as much information as possible. They leave. You don't know what happened with their project, their ideas, what they're doing. You're there to help. You want to be a promoter and ambassador for them. And then you hear down the road that they've crashed and burned, or maybe that they've been successful, but there's just no continuity there. So I would say keep the dialogue open because, again, you never know what role they might play in your life. They could be your boss one day. So you want to follow through is important.
Generations build relationships different ways. And so never assume that the person you're talking to builds a relationship the same way and wants to have a text relationship. If you can ask them and put that in their hands, letting them know that you value the time that they're giving you, and would you like me to contact you by phone, by email, in person? That just really helps, feels like you're coming to the middle there.
That's right.
What a terrific dialogue we've had today. Thank you, audience members, for all of your questions. Panelists, thank you for your advice. I heard a lot of listen, learn, lead, be vulnerable, seek out mentors, the impact of technology, adapt, acclimate to culture. All of these things combined are going to help us to make that climb up the corporate ladder. I want to thank the Launchpad for having us all today, the College of Business and Innovation alumni affiliate, and our panelists for getting us on a great start to climb the ladder.
And thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks everybody for coming.